The rain had fallen through the night, not the gentle kind that lulls people to sleep, but the relentless kind that floods streets, delays deliveries, and makes the city slow down. Outside, the apartment complex was wrapped in a blanket of gray clouds. Water dripped steadily from balconies. Puddles reflected the dim glow of streetlights that had not yet switched off. Most people were still asleep, safe beneath warm blankets, dreaming peaceful dreams. But in apartment 7B, a woman opened her eyes before the alarm could ring. Ananya reached for her phone. 4:45 a.m. a notification flashed across the screen. Milk delivery delayed due to overnight rain. She stared at it for a moment, then quietly got out of bed. No complaints, no frustration, just acceptance. The kind of acceptance that develops when life trains you to solve problems before anybody else notices them. She walked to the refrigerator, empty. No milk for tea, no milk for breakfast, no milk for anyone. She glanced toward the bedroom. Her husband slept peacefully. The rest of the family slept peacefully. And just like that, before the sun had even risen, the first responsibility of the day had found its way to her. Because some women don't wake up to a new day. They wake up to a list of responsibilities, waiting patiently beside their pillow. Umbrella in one hand, phone in the other. Ananya stepped into the drizzle. The rain had slowed, but the road still carried the scars of the night. Waterlogged streets, closed shops, stray dogs sheltering beneath parked vehicles. The city looked tired, much like her. She walked from one store to another until she finally found a small dairy booth preparing to open. As she waited, she glanced at the growing list of office emails on her phone. The day had not officially started, yet work had already begun. A few minutes later, carrying milk packets and balancing her office bag on her shoulder, she began walking back home. Nobody would know about this small morning adventure. Nobody would ask where the milk came from. Nobody would realize she had walked through the rain before dawn. And that was the strange thing about people who quietly keep families running. Their effort often becomes visible only when it is missing. When breakfast appears on the table, nobody asks how. When tea arrives on time, nobody wonders why. Everything simply works. And because everything works, nobody notices the person making it happen. By 6 o'clock, the house had come alive. The pressure cooker whistled. Tea simmered on one stove. Breakfast cooked on another. Lunch boxes waited to be packed. And almost as if someone had rung an invisible bell, the requests began arriving. Her father-in-law needed a doctor's appointment booked. Her mother-in-law wanted help with an insurance payment. Her brother-in-law was already planning weekend snacks for the upcoming cricket match. And from the bedroom came her husband's voice asking where his tie was. One request, then another, then another. Individually, they sounded harmless. Together, they became a mountain. The funny thing was that nobody intended to burden her. Nobody was being cruel. Nobody was demanding. They simply assumed she would handle it, because she always did. And sometimes the heaviest burden in the world is not hatred. It is expectation. The quiet expectation that someone will always be there, always remember, always manage, always sacrifice, and somehow never get tired. Officially, Ananya worked as a project manager for a multinational company. But that title told only half her story. The other half never appeared on visiting cards. She managed medicine schedules, electricity bills, insurance premiums, investment reminders, doctor appointments, repair requests, family birthdays, grocery planning, festival preparations, and countless little details that nobody else remembered because they knew she would. Some people carry handbags. Ananya carried mental checklists, hundreds of them every day, every hour, every minute. The world often celebrates visible work. The reports, the meetings, the achievements, but hidden beneath every functioning home is another kind of work. The invisible work, the remembering, the planning, the worrying, the organizing. The work that rarely earns appreciation, because it is only noticed when it stops being done. The traffic was merciless. The meetings were worse. By 10 in the morning, Ananya was standing inside a conference room presenting a project update. Her manager interrupted her twice, corrected her publicly, questioned her preparation. The room fell silent. Ananya forced a smile and continued, because professionalism demanded composure. Inside, however, she felt exhausted. Her phone vibrated again. A message from home. Then another. And another. A medicine reminder. A grocery request. A question about dinner. A reminder about the weekend. The irony was impossible to miss. At work, people expected her to think like a machine. At home, people expected her to function like one. And somewhere between both worlds, she was slowly forgetting what it felt like to simply be human. That evening, while searching for an old document, Ananya opened a forgotten cupboard. Inside were pieces of another life: paintbrushes, half-finished canvases, a diary filled with sketches, photographs from college, dreams she had carefully packed away and forgot. Once upon a time, she loved painting. She could spend hours creating colors from nothing. She loved music too, long drives, reading novels, watching the rain with a cup of coffee and absolutely no responsibilities. She smiled as she looked through the memories. Then the smile faded, not because those dreams had disappeared, but because she could no longer remember the last time she had time for them. Life had not stolen her passions. Life had simply buried them beneath responsibilities. And slowly, without even realizing it, Ananya had become someone who spent all her energy taking care of everyone else's life while quietly postponing her own. The rain returned that evening, not as a storm but as a steady curtain of water that blurred headlights and slowed traffic across the city. Ananya sat trapped in her office cab, watching the clock move faster than the vehicles around her. Her presentation had gone badly. Her manager's criticism still echoed in her mind. Her head hurt. Her shoulders ached. All she wanted was a few minutes of silence. A few minutes where nobody needed anything from her. By the time she reached home, her clothes were damp and her energy completely drained. The moment she opened the door, loud cheers exploded from the living room. India had hit a boundary. The family was gathered around the television, faces lit with excitement, eyes fixed on the screen. Nobody noticed the tired woman standing at the entrance. Nobody noticed the exhaustion in her eyes, and then the requests began. "Ananya, can you make some tea? Pakoras would be perfect in this weather. And bring those masala peanuts too." The words were spoken casually, lovingly even, yet every sentence felt like another small weight added to an already overloaded heart. She smiled, nodded, walked toward the kitchen, because that was what she always did. And sometimes the strongest people are not the ones who fight. They are the ones who continue moving forward even when they are running on empty. Hours later, the match ended. The television was switched off. The family drifted toward their rooms. The laughter faded. The conversation stopped. The house slowly surrendered to silence. But Ananya's day was not over. The dishes still waited. The kitchen still needed cleaning. Lunch boxes had to be prepared for the next day. Clothes needed folding. Reminders needed setting. Tomorrow had to be organized before today could end. When she finally sat down, it was close to midnight. The house was asleep. The city was asleep. Even the rain had grown quiet. For the first time all day, there was nobody asking anything from her. And strangely, that made the silence feel even heavier. Because when the noise disappeared, there was nothing left to distract her from her own exhaustion. The tears came without warning. Not dramatic tears, not angry tears, just tired tears. The kind that arrive when a person has been strong for far too long. The small temple in the corner of the kitchen glowed softly in the darkness. A single oil lamp flickered gently. Ananya stood before it with folded hands. Her eyes were red. Her shoulders drooped beneath the weight of another impossible day. For a few moments she said nothing. She simply stood there, gathering the courage to speak. Then finally, in a trembling whisper, she began. "They aren't bad people." The words surprised even her, because they were true. Her husband wasn't cruel. Her in-laws weren't heartless. Her brother-in-law wasn't selfish. They loved her in their own way, but love without understanding can still leave someone lonely. "They just don't understand," she whispered. "They don't see what it feels like." A tear rolled down her cheek. Maybe men will understand women only when life makes them one. The prayer wasn't born from anger. It wasn't revenge. It was exhaustion. The exhaustion of someone who desperately wished to be understood. Moments later, she went to bed, and for the first time in years, she fell asleep carrying a silent wish in her heart. 3 days later, the impossible happened. Rohan collapsed during a meeting at work. At first, everyone assumed it was stress. Maybe exhaustion, maybe food poisoning, nothing serious, but the doctors looked increasingly confused. Tests led to more tests. Questions led to more questions. Finally, the senior doctor entered the room carrying a report that seemed impossible even to him. The entire family waited anxiously. The doctor adjusted his glasses, looked at the report again, then looked at Rohan. His voice trembled slightly. "Mr. Rohan." He paused. "You are pregnant." The room fell silent. No one laughed. No one spoke. The human mind has a way of rejecting things that make no sense. For several seconds, reality itself seemed to stop. The doctor looked as shocked as everyone else. Rohan stared at him in disbelief. Surely this was a mistake. Surely someone had mixed up reports. Surely this could not be real. But reality had already begun changing, and none of them knew it yet. Within hours, news channels exploded. Within days, the entire world was talking about one thing. Men everywhere were becoming pregnant. Delhi, Mumbai, London, Tokyo, New York, no country was spared, no explanation existed. Scientists argued, governments panicked, religious leaders debated, social media erupted. Every television channel carried the same breaking news. The impossible had become normal. The world that had always assumed pregnancy belonged only to women suddenly found itself confronting an entirely different reality. People were confused, frightened, curious, and yet beneath all the chaos, something extraordinary was happening. For the first time in history, millions of men were about to experience a journey they had only observed from a distance. A journey they had respected, admired, celebrated, but never truly understood. The first few weeks were difficult. The months that followed were worse. Rohan discovered that his body no longer belonged entirely to him. Morning sickness arrived without warning. Back pain became a daily companion. Sleep disappeared. Fatigue settled into every muscle. Even simple tasks felt exhausting. At work, concentration became difficult. At home, patience became difficult. Some days he felt emotional for no reason. Other days he felt overwhelmed by everything. And slowly, something unexpected began happening. The challenges were no longer physical. They became emotional. For the first time, he understood what it felt like when people dismissed your discomfort, when they expected you to keep functioning no matter how tired you were, when they assumed you were exaggerating, when they expected strength without offering support. And somewhere in those difficult months, a question quietly entered his mind. If this was so hard for him, how many battles had women been fighting all along without anyone truly understanding them? As the months passed, something unexpected began happening. The physical discomfort was difficult, but the emotional burden was far worse. People who had once sympathized with pregnant men slowly grew impatient. Workplaces expected productivity, families expected normalcy, society expected strength. And whenever someone struggled, there was always another voice ready with advice. Stop overthinking. Everyone goes through it. You're making too much of it. The words sounded harmless, yet they cut deeper than anyone realized. One afternoon, Rohan sat quietly in his office cafeteria. A group of younger colleagues at a nearby table laughed over a video circulating online. A heavily pregnant man struggling to climb a staircase. Thousands of comments mocked him. Thousands more turned his discomfort into entertainment. The entire table laughed. Rohan tried to laugh too, but he couldn't, because for the first time the joke felt personal. For the first time he understood what it meant to have your pain reduced to amusement. And suddenly he remembered something. Every joke about women's emotions, every comment about mood swings, every dismissive remark made so casually. Things he himself had once ignored, things he had never questioned. The realization was uncomfortable, but it was also impossible to escape. Sometimes understanding begins the moment we stop looking at suffering from a distance. As his pregnancy progressed, Rohan found himself noticing things he had never noticed before. Women standing in crowded buses after long days at work. Young mothers carrying children while balancing office calls. Elderly women quietly serving entire families before sitting down to eat themselves. He began seeing things that had always existed around him. Things he had simply never paid attention to. One evening, while struggling to bend down and tie his shoelaces, he suddenly thought of Ananya. The early mornings, the endless chores, the office pressure, the responsibilities she carried without complaint. The realization struck him harder than any physical pain. He had always believed he was supporting his wife, but support was not occasional appreciation. Support was participation. Support was responsibility shared. Support was noticing when someone was tired before they were forced to say it. For years, he had admired Ananya, but perhaps he had never truly understood her. And understanding, he realized, was a far greater form of love than admiration. The rain had returned, just as it had on the night everything began. Rohan stepped out of his office building and walked slowly toward his car. The sky was gray, the roads were flooded. His body felt heavy, his mind even heavier. Then it happened. A speeding vehicle raced through a waterlogged stretch of road. Before he could react, a wall of muddy water crashed into him. His clothes were soaked, his face covered in dirt. The people nearby laughed, some pointed. One young man even pulled out his phone and started recording. Rohan stood frozen, Not because of the water, not because of the embarrassment, but because something inside him finally broke. For a brief moment, he felt completely helpless, completely exposed, completely alone. And suddenly, through the noise of the rain, another memory surfaced. Ananya standing quietly in the kitchen. Ananya returning home exhausted. Ananya smiling through her pain. Ananya carrying burdens nobody else could see. The rain continued to fall, but now every drop felt different, because for the first time he wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about her. Rohan suddenly woke up with a gasp. His heart pounded violently. Rain tapped gently against the bedroom window. For several seconds he didn't know where he was. Instinctively his hands moved toward his stomach. Nothing, no pregnancy, no hospital, no worldwide phenomenon, no impossible reality. Only silence, only darkness, only the familiar sound of rain outside. Slowly, understanding arrived. He heaved a sigh of relief. Alas, it had all been a dream. A long dream, a strange dream, a terrifying dream. Yet as he sat there in the darkness, one truth remained: the emotions had been real. The humiliation had been real, the loneliness had been real, the helplessness had been real, and most importantly, the lesson had been real. He turned toward the other side of the bed. Ananya was asleep. Her face looked peaceful, but even in sleep, exhaustion lingered beneath her eyes. For the first time, he wondered how many difficult days she had hidden behind her smile, how many tears she had wiped away before anyone noticed, how many times she had needed help but chose silence instead. The answer frightened him. He had tears in his eyes, because he knew it was more than he could count. The clock showed 5 a.m., the same time Ananya woke up every single day. Quietly, Rohan got out of bed. For the first time, he walked into the kitchen before she did. The kitchen looked different that morning, not because anything had changed, but because his eyes had changed. He noticed the medicine chart stuck to the refrigerator, the grocery list, the neatly arranged lunch boxes, the countless details that kept the family functioning, details he had taken for granted. A few minutes later, he returned carrying a cup of tea. When Ananya opened her eyes, confusion crossed her face. Rohan. She sat up slowly. He handed her the cup. For a moment, neither spoke. Then finally, he broke the silence. "I'm sorry." Ananya looked surprised. "For what?" Rohan smiled gently. A smile filled with gratitude and regret. "For not seeing you." The words hung in the air, simple yet powerful. "For seeing everything you did, but never seeing what it cost you." His voice softened. "For every morning you woke up before everyone else. For every responsibility you carried without complaint. For every dream you quietly postponed so that others could live theirs." Tears gathered in Ananya's eyes, not because she wanted an apology, but because someone had finally understood. Rohan reached for her hand. "You have spent years taking care of all of us." He paused. "Now it's our turn to take care of you too." And in that moment, something far more important than guilt entered the room. Empathy. The rain had finally stopped. For the first time in days, sunlight pushed through the clouds. Golden rays entered the apartment. A new morning had arrived. The house looked exactly the same. The same walls, the same furniture, the same family, yet something had changed. Rohan helped prepare breakfast. His brother joined him. His father organized his own medicines. His mother helped with the kitchen. Small actions, simple actions, but meaningful ones. Meanwhile, Ananya sat quietly by the window with her tea. For the first time in years, she wasn't rushing anywhere. For the first time in years, she wasn't carrying everything alone. And as she watched the sunlight break through the retreating clouds, a gentle smile appeared on her face. Perhaps this was what understanding felt like. Not grand speeches, not dramatic promises, just people choosing to share each other's burdens, because women do not ask to be worshipped. They do not ask to be placed on pedestals. They do not ask for miracles. They simply ask to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. And perhaps the greatest gift we can give the women in our lives is not flowers, not greetings, not a single day of celebration, but a lifetime of respect, a lifetime of partnership, a lifetime of gratitude.